Welcome. In this course, we will trace how light sport aircraft and the Sport Pilot Certificate began in 2004 and how the FAA's MOSAIC modernization changes the picture today. We will start with the basics: what light sport means, why the category was created, and how sport pilot privileges were originally bounded to simpler, slower, two-seat aircraft. We will keep this module focused on the 2004 baseline and use later modules to compare it to MOSAIC. Before 2004, many aspiring pilots faced high costs, lengthy training, and aging legacy aircraft. The FAA sought a simpler path to bring new pilots into aviation safely: lighter aircraft with limited performance, coupled with a streamlined pilot certificate. That policy intent is described in the 2004 Federal Register preamble that established light sport aircraft and the Sport Pilot Certificate. In July 2004, the FAA issued the final rule titled Certification of Aircraft and Airmen for the Operation of Light Sport Aircraft. It created the Sport Pilot Certificate and the Light Sport Aircraft category, enabling ready-to-fly airplanes that meet industry consensus standards and a pilot certificate tailored to these simpler machines. This rule is the foundation we will compare against MOSAIC later in the course. Under Title 14, Code of Federal Regulations, Section 1.1, a light sport aircraft in 2004 was defined by hard limits: maximum takeoff weight, or MTOW, of 1,320 pounds, or 1,430 pounds for seaplanes. Stall speed less than or equal to 45 knots calibrated airspeed. VH, or maximum level flight speed with continuous power, not more than 120 knots calibrated airspeed. 2 seats maximum. A single reciprocating engine if powered, a fixed or ground adjustable propeller, an unpressurized cabin, and fixed landing gear except for gliders and seaplanes. Sport pilots may act as pilot in command of a light sport aircraft and can share certain operating expenses with a passenger. The rule intentionally limits complexity and environment. No night flying, no Class Alpha airspace. Additional training is required for Class Bravo, Class Charlie, Class Delta, or towered airports. No more than 1 passenger, and altitude capped at 10,000 feet mean sea level or 2,000 feet above ground level, whichever is higher. A sport pilot may qualify with either a medical certificate or a valid driver's license when operating under sport pilot limitations. Light sport lowered barriers and inspired new designs, but adoption in the United States settled into a modest niche relative to legacy Part 23 training fleets. Analysts point to aircraft price, performance ceilings, and training ecosystems as factors. Even years after launch, the category remained relatively small despite real wins in accessibility. What worked? A new, lower-cost entry path. Consensus standards accelerated new models, and sport pilot medical flexibility broadened participation. What did not? Performance caps limited mission utility. Factory pricing often rivaled used Part 23 trainers, and oversight concerns periodically surfaced as the industry matured. Over time, the FAA adjusted sport pilot subparts to address implementation lessons. Quick check. Which statement did not apply to the 2004 light sport definition? A. Maximum of 2 seats. B. Stall speed less than or equal to 45 knots calibrated airspeed. C. Constant speed propeller allowed on powered light sport aircraft. Correct answer, C. Powered light sport aircraft were restricted to fixed or ground adjustable propellers in the definition. Recap. The 2004 Light Sport and Sport Pilot Framework intentionally traded capability for accessibility, using tightly defined performance and operational limits. In the next module, we will track how those limits evolved, setting the stage for the FAA's MOSAIC Final Rule in 2025, which pivots from prescriptive weight to performance-based criteria and revises sport pilot privileges. This module traces the evolution of light sport aircraft and sport pilot rules between 2004 and 2025. We will look at how industry and regulators adapted, what challenges emerged, and how those challenges led to the FAA's MOSAIC modernization effort. Think of this as the bridge between the original experiment in accessible aviation and the reforms finalized in 2025. Unlike traditional Part 23 certification, light sport aircraft are produced under industry consensus standards developed through ASTM International. The FAA does not issue type certificates for light sport aircraft. Instead, manufacturers self-certify that their designs meet the published consensus standards, and the FAA audits manufacturers for compliance. This lowers barriers but also raises oversight challenges compared to type certificated aircraft. By the early 2010s, questions arose about how well manufacturers were following consensus standards. In 2012, the FAA reported concerns with compliance and quality control, leading to increased scrutiny of the program. While most light sport aircraft proved safe, the self-certification model created tension between industry growth and the FAA's oversight responsibilities. The light sport market faced practical barriers. Prices for factory-built light sport aircraft often approached or exceeded those of used Part 23 trainers. Performance limits like the 120 knot top speed and the 1,320-pound weight limit restricted mission utility. As a result, light sport aircraft remained popular with niche recreational pilots, but never displaced Cessna and Piper trainers in many flight schools. The Sport Pilot Certificate lowered barriers, but adoption remained modest. By the mid-2010s, the number of new sport pilot certificates each year was far below private pilot levels. Many instructors and schools hesitated to embrace sport pilot training, partly because light sport aircraft were limited in what they could do. Supply and demand never fully aligned. By the late 2010s, pilot groups such as EAA and AOPA advocated for reform. They argued that weight and speed caps were arbitrary and that performance-based criteria would be more effective. Industry pushed for a broader light sport framework that could include higher performance aircraft and allow sport pilots more privileges. In 2023, the FAA released the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking for MOSAIC, the modernization of special airworthiness certification. The proposal outlined a shift away from weight limits towards stall speed criteria and a plan to expand the scope of aircraft eligible under the light sport framework. This proposal became the foundation for the 2025 final rule. Take a moment to reflect. Of the challenges we reviewed, manufacturer oversight, market price, performance caps, and pilot uptake, which do you think was the most significant barrier holding light sport back? This reflection will help connect past limitations with MOSAIC solutions. Summary: between 2004 and 2025, light sport proved the concept of lower cost entry, but faced barriers in oversight, pricing, and practicality. These lessons directly informed the MOSAIC rule, which modernizes the framework with performance-based standards. In the next module, we will unpack the details of MOSAIC itself. In July 2025, the FAA finalized MOSAIC, the modernization of special airworthiness certification. This is the most significant reform of light aircraft regulation since 2004. It updates definitions, broadens eligible aircraft, and expands sport pilot privileges, shifting away from arbitrary weight limits toward performance-based criteria. Most provisions take effect in October 22, 2025, with some deferred to July 24, 2026. The original light sport rules capped maximum takeoff weight at 1,320 pounds. MOSAIC removes that cap and instead uses stall speed as the defining safety metric. Eligible aircraft must have a stall speed not greater than 54 knots calibrated airspeed or up to 59 knots with qualifying safety equipment. This change opens the door for larger, heavier aircraft that still meet safe low-speed handling. MOSAIC broadens the range of aircraft eligible for light sport certification. The rule now includes fixed-wing aircraft with up to 4 seats, rotorcraft, powered lift designs such as electric vertical takeoff and landing, also called eVTOL, and even certain legacy general aviation aircraft that meet the stall speed limits. Sport pilots remain restricted to 1 passenger, but the eligible fleet is much larger. Under MOSAIC, sport pilots enjoy expanded privileges with appropriate training endorsements. New privileges can include retractable landing gear, constant speed propellers, night flying with training, and even certain helicopters or powered lift aircraft within the light sport framework. The driver's license medical remains valid for sport pilots operating under these privileges when they comply with its limitations. MOSAIC expands light sport repairman privileges to cover the new aircraft categories. Owners and mechanics who complete FAA-accepted training courses may perform inspections and maintenance on these aircraft. This supports industry growth while preserving safety through structured training requirements. The MOSAIC final rule takes effect in phases. Most provisions become active on October 22, 2025. Certain amendments, especially those involving expanded pilot privileges and training standards, take effect on July 24, 2026. This transition period gives industry and training providers time to adapt. Knowledge check. Under MOSAIC, which factor now defines eligibility for light sport aircraft? A. Maximum takeoff weight. B. Stall speed limit. C. Total number of seats. Correct answer. B. Stall speed is now the defining metric, replacing the old weight cap. Pilot groups such as EAA and AOPA praised MOSAIC as a modernization that aligns rules with technology and safety. Manufacturers see opportunities for new designs and for certifying existing aircraft under MOSAIC. Some concerns remain about training capacity and FAA oversight, but overall, reception has been strongly positive. In summary, MOSAIC replaces prescriptive weight and performance caps with stall speed-based eligibility, adds new aircraft types, and expands sport pilot privileges. This marks a major evolution in general aviation policy. In the next module, we will directly compare the 2004 Light Sport Framework with the 2025 MOSAIC rule side by side. Now, let us bring it all together. In this final module, we will directly compare the 2004 Light Sport Framework with the 2025 MOSAIC rule. You will see how the FAA moved from prescriptive, weight-based definitions and narrow privileges to performance-based standards that broaden both aircraft and pilot opportunities. Aircraft definition changed dramatically. In 2004, maximum takeoff weight 1,320 pounds, stall speed 45 knots or less, 2 seats only, and limited to fixed landing gear and fixed or ground-adjustable propellers. In 2025, no weight cap, stall speed 54 knots or less, or up to 59 with safety equipment, up to 4 seats, and categories expanded to rotorcraft and powered lift. This is a fundamental shift in what counts as light sport. For pilots, the changes are just as striking. In 2004, sport pilots could carry 1 passenger, fly day VFR only, and were limited to fixed gear, fixed prop airplanes. In 2025, endorsements can expand privileges to include night flying, retractable landing gear, constant speed propellers, and even certain helicopters or powered lift aircraft, all still with 1 passenger maximum. In 2004, light sport aircraft relied on ASTM consensus standards with manufacturers self-certifying compliance. MOSAIC preserves that approach, but extends repairman privileges and expands certification pathways to cover the broader aircraft set. This balances accessibility with structured training requirements for maintenance personnel. For sport pilots, MOSAIC is transformational. It preserves the driver's license medical option, keeps flying affordable, and expands what aircraft and privileges they can use with proper endorsements. While the 1 passenger limit remains, the scope of aircraft eligible under sport pilot rules is much wider, creating more realistic mission utility. For manufacturers, MOSAIC is an opportunity. They can design larger and more capable aircraft under consensus standards, bring electric vertical takeoff and landing and rotorcraft into the fold, and even certify certain legacy general aviation aircraft under the new criteria. This opens broader markets while maintaining lower certification costs than traditional Part 23 pathways. Safety oversight remains central. The FAA continues to rely on performance-based standards with industry consensus, while expanding repairman training requirements. Critics worry about consistency, but the FAA argues stall speed is a more relevant safety metric than weight, and that MOSAIC still ensures low energy flight envelopes. Case study: an airplane weighing 1,800 pounds with 4 seats and a stall speed of 53 knots calibrated airspeed. Under 2004 rules, this was not eligible as light sport due to weight and seat count. Under MOSAIC, it is eligible as long as a sport pilot carries only 1 passenger. This shows how MOSAIC broadens practical flying options while keeping safety margins intact. To conclude, the 2004 Sport Pilot and Light Sport framework lowered barriers but remained a niche category. The 2025 MOSAIC rule modernizes the system with performance-based criteria, expanded aircraft categories, and broader pilot privileges, while still keeping sport pilot accessible. Together, they represent the FAA's evolving balance between safety, innovation, and accessibility in general aviation.